question for all of us is how are you? How are you? What's here now? What's the flavor of self, of beingness that you're most aware of in this moment? Is it presence? There something like stillness here or peace, calmness? Is there a causeless connectedness, a connection that's just here with the room you're in, the tree outside your home, with the four of us who are here with you? Is there a sense of openness here or acceptance or welcoming? What's the flavor of beingness? Flavor, or it might be more kind of zen and zen like of just there's just equanimity here. It's just its spaciousness. Some of us we know it as awareness. There's awareness. I'm aware of what's happening. I'm aware of my room. What's the flavor that's here for you? We also often think of this as the background, the sky. And recently I've been calling it like the left hand, the sense of the left hand, this beingness, this self. And then from here, see if it of those words or whatever your word is, what's the most prominent word for self or beingness for you right now? It's the word of those that's like, that's it for me. And with that, can you let yourself sink into it? Sink into it so you can experience this somatically as the body. Can you can know this stuff, this beingness, whatever your word is for it, even if it's just if it's calm, presence, awareness, even if it's just whatever it is. How do we somatically know that that's here? And then from here, what are you aware of? What's the weather that comes and goes? What are the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that you're aware of from here? We call this the foreground or the parts. We label these as parts in IFS, but there's no need to use that language, whatever your language is for what arises in the foreground. What's the loudest thought, feeling, or sensation that's here for you right now? Maybe it's excitement. Oh, wow. And Jessica, Jean, and Eli are here. Wow. And Sid, we get to be together. Maybe it's like an enthusiasm. Maybe it's a skeptic. Is this really going to be helpful for me? Maybe there's a little boredom, some tiredness. It gets really early for Jessica on the West Coast. Maybe it's some discomfort in the body. What's the loudest? What's the loudest for you? And as you become aware of that, where do you hear it from? As you hear that, oh, my back hurts, I don't like this, or I'm tired, or gosh, this is exciting. There's going to be something new today. Where do you hear it? Is it out in front of you? Is it in your head? Is it beside you? Where do you hear that? Or is it more somatic, where you just feel it? See if you can find a location for that. You can be aware of it as a location. Sometimes I'm calling this now like the foreground, and sometimes the right hand. And then we're gonna pendulate back to beingness. Let's see if we can pendulate back. We're just gonna shift back to whatever your beingness self-word is. See if you can. Sometimes for some of us, it's stepping back, it's falling back, it's zooming out. How do you move back to this, to beingness, to rest as that quality of beingness? The presence, the awareness, the peace, the love, the connectedness, whatever that word is. And how do you rest back in that so that you can feel it somatically? Playing with the sense of either or as we're back in self. Let's just breathe a couple times in this as this beingness. And then let's open up for the part again. What's our part? What's our arising that's here? And let's just be aware of that again, whatever that voice is, whatever that sensation is. So our attention goes back to the part. And lastly, can both of them be here? Can we be aware of the part while there's a sense of being, resting as, or aware as the beingness? Can they all be here? And how does your system do that? How do you make sense of that? The both and. This is where we use these images and metaphors sometimes in this work. The sense of, oh, it's like a hot tub of beingness. And the parts, these arisings, they just rest, they soak in the hot tub, the warmth, the love, the presence. Or sometimes it's like a birthday party. We're throwing a party for our parts, for what's arising. They're just being welcomed and loved. Sometimes it's a roomy guest house, different images. Sometimes it's the galaxy, is the space, the self, and the parts are the constellation of planets. And last question. From here, are the parts, are the foreground completely separate from the self and beingness? Are they completely separate? Or when you feel into the parts, the arisings, the sense of, I'm not comfortable, I want something else. When is this darn meditation going to end? Whatever that's coming up for you. Can you find even in that want, the lack, the contraction, the resistance of the parts, that there is some beingness, there's some self there? Even maybe see if you can look a little closer and feel into it a little closer. Can you find some self, some beingness in the contraction itself? That's the third view of effortless IFS. But when you're ready, let's come back together. Can you gently opening your eyes without looking at anything? They just, here we are. You're not alone. There are four of us with you. And then just for Jean, what we usually do is go around and we just become fascinated with how this is playing in each of us. How the parts and how self is moving in each of us. Before we do that, let's shake it off a little bit. That was a lot. That was a lot for a little diving in. And Anne, who's got this fancy hat on today, all of us, it was a lot. And then here's the good news, and this is what I love about this exploration, which same as Angelo's, right? Ultimately, there's nothing that needs to be done. There's nothing that needs to be learned or understood, because our very essence is this fulfillment. You are innocence and beauty. You are this radiant presence. And in our game, we get to meet in that. And then we also get to meet in everything that's playing in our systems. But nothing needs to be learned. This is playtime. We're out on the playground together. Who would like to go first?
Well, I will if no one's going to volunteer.
All right, our newcomer Jean is here to go first. What you got?
Oh, the beingness, the word that came to mind was peace and I just felt like I was in a womb, if you will, a very safe, quiet, steady place. Just peace. And then the part, I actually was having a hard time differentiating it from self, which that was kind of new for me because normally it's like, well, yeah, this is self, and this is um, something that's arising in self. But maybe because so the feeling was excited anticipation, and I could feel that like um, energy here in the top of the chest. I guess that's where I feel excitement. And but I was like, but this is self. It it felt like self.
Mm. Well,
So
let me pause just a minute here because we want to. Part of my job is to see if I can make this as rich for each of us as if we were doing an individual session.
mhm.
And the way we do that is like when Jean is sharing, it's like, hey, she's sharing her exquisite system, what's happening inside of her, but she's also an invitation for each of us if we want. And sometimes we're like, no, I got plenty going on with my system. I'm not going there, right? But
Mm.
as Jean says, it's described self as peace. She describes it as peace. How does that resonate in your system? Peace. And she describes it as being in a womb. You find that being in a womb. What's that like? What's that like for your parts, for what arises in you, for you? The sense of, wow, I'm in a womb, I'm being held in a womb. That like? Is it love? Is it warmth? Is it care? Is it connectedness? Is it total freedom? We can just fully let go. I'm being held in a womb. What do you find in that? Is it a sense of returning home? And then she describes, she's like, I'm not the part for her. There's this excited anticipation, but it feels like self. It feels like beingness. Oh, here's a question: like, are you curious about that? It's like, it feels like beingness, this excited anticipation. And so that raises the question for each of us, for you. There's no right answer to this. How do you discern beingness, self, from a part? And again, this is just especially where Gene and Eli just came from with Angelo, because that work will be everything is of this. There is no separation. Everything is of self, which is where this work goes ultimately to which I call the third view. But sometimes some people we don't even go there at all. Sometimes we just get we stay in the discernment can be really useful, and it's important in this journey between self and parts. How do you discern between the two? And I'm going to give you a few ways that people do it and see how do you discern. One is the sense of in self, there's an absence of lack. There's an absence of lack. Or you could even say there's a sense of fulfillment. There's just a causeless fulfillment as self, as beingness. And in parts, sometimes there's a sense of there's a lack, even if it's a very subtle lack. Even if you won $10 million, there would still be what do I do with that? Where do I go? What happens next? A lack. So absence of lack versus lack. Or self is the absence of resistance. Absence of resistance. Self, sometimes there's a little resistance. And then for some, there's self is the absence of separation. Parts of separation. They're separate. The sense of when I ask Gene and ask you, where do you find that part? Where do you find it? For parts, there's a sense of location. Like they arise, there's a sense of location where we find them. And then when we go deeply into self, what opens for some people is like it's just here. It's just here. It's not location. But this all opens differently in each of us. What's the discernment for you? And then some even use the sense of time and timelessness, because you'll hear me sometimes say now, there's just now, it's now. And that the idea of self and beingness is it's just now, where parts, there's a sense of a timeline, and often parts are, there's often a sense of a future, that fulfillment will come in the future. And that can be an easy one for some people, is the sense of there's any sense of kind of getting something in time.
Yeah.
All right. Jeans, how's that for you? And
Yeah, that resonates. Yeah, the so the excited anticipation, certainly there's no resistance there, there's no lack. And certainly when I was on the retreat and other times when there's a deep sadness or something where I I'm not sure I should deem it as positive, or what we sometimes our mind would like to call positive or negative. We put them in like different categories, I guess. And so it's saying to me that, any feeling or any part that comes up that has lack or resistance, that isn't abiding, I guess. That
mm,
is what truly came up.
nice.
So the excited anticipation, it's now, but it isn't always there. Whereas the peace
Mm,
of being is always there. So the part is a part. It comes and
great,
goes.
great.
It's fleeting.
And again, and just again, for all of us, there's no right answer here. It's a celebration of how life is moving in you. And for some of us, it's like, oh, I have no idea. There's just this
Hmm.
happening, and this happening. And we love
Hmm.
all of that and celebrate all of that. There's because sometimes our understanding parts can get caught up. Oh, I need to get very clear on parts and self and this and that. I need to map it. Oh, that's just a part
Yeah,
for
part of
all
me
of
was
us.
like, why does it matter? But I guess
Great.
that
We're
came up.
just, it's all in the play. And I'm also aware that Eli said that we only have him for an hour. And I'm kind of anxious to kind of dive in with Eli. And any final words, Gene?
No, I'm enjoying this.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so before we go to Eli, just for everybody, how are we doing? How are you? How are you? Just notice with the how are you? What are the parts? What are the parts that are here? What are the thoughts and feelings and sensations? And what are they arising in? And before we go to Eli, and anything you have, I haven't even got like not even a word from me. I haven't gotten to connect at all. Anything that's bubbling before we go to Eli that you're just wanting to just say hi, or I'm okay, or this is a lot, Sid, or my ears hurt. I'm not sure what the fancy hat is for.
Actually, talk about aging. I had a facelift on Monday, last Monday. So that's what this is all about. And part of me felt like obviously that was important, and I went ahead and did it. Um, and and since I did that, I've had a hard time feeling self. It's more been my parts that are like when I'm meditating, when I'm trying to meditate in the morning. Um, my parts are just taking over. So
Yeah.
um, I'm not unhappy that I did this, and um, and I don't fully know how I feel about it yet. Um,
I'm excited about what you just shared. It feels like it's a preview. Like, can you all relate? Like, it's like when we went to dive in with Anne in a little while, and we could dive in completely to this. It's like, what parts are coming up? What parts are there that, like, I'm not sure if this was the right thing. I'm so excited about this, and it's like, what parts are there? And I'm gonna bet that every part that Anne shares, we know it, that none of it is going to be foreign to any of us. Like, what? I've never had a facelift. I'm going to bet none of those parts are foreign to us. And is that scary, Anne, or wherever you want to go with it? But it just sounds really interesting to dive into that. But I do want to go to Eli first because we're losing him early today.
Feel free to stay if you want to stay there, and I can go next.
No,
That's all right. Okay, if that's all right. And anything else bubbling, Anne, before we just do it like a quick check-in?
yeah, but go to Eli first. I want to hear him.
Great. We're gonna go to Eli and Jessica. Anything kind of quick bubbling just so we can, because Jessica's here. No. Oh, okay. And just as we move to Eli, one of those words, one of these qualities of self I really enjoy is this connectedness and the idea that connectedness is here. And we had the treat today of having 4 of us with you, that you're not alone, that, and perhaps you're never alone with this connectedness, but there's this sense of this field of shared being, this shared self. And Dick Schwartz often speaks of this, that so much more can be accessible and available as we connect as community, as we're not holding all of our parts, the space all by ourselves anymore. We've got this shared love, this shared presence, this shared peace. And perhaps, can you feel that? Can your parts feel it? That they're not just being met by your system. There's this bigger hot tub, this bigger space, this bigger love meeting them. All right, Eli, what's happening?
It's got an interesting sort of visual of I usually like the hot tub, but I had a different kind of visual today of what self was like. There's kind of this picture of like a burning building and like little parts running around trying to like get around or get out, and then they sort of jump out, and what they realize is like it's a bouncy house, and they land, and the bouncy house, like, it absorbs them as self. And so what how that's coming up for me now is in the context of like effortless IFS is that I keep like the parts will come up, and then it's like we're on fire, and then it's remember, jump, like you can fall right into that self. So it's like, so parts that come up, it's like, oh, but we have to do something, we have to get somewhere, and then I feel like, all right, that like it's on fire again, and then it's like, oh, let that in too, and like let that rest into the softness and the warmth of self. And so that's kind of like you keep like forgetting and then kind of remembering that.
Okay, we got to pause there. How's that for everyone? We all relate to that. House is on fire. We gotta get out of here. Jump out. Jump. Oh, look. Bouncy house. We're being met by self. Everything is okay. Self is here. Being welcomed, held. What's that like? What's it like for your parts if you're able to follow what this experience of Eli's? What would it be like for your parts? It's like they forget, they feel like they're all alone, they panic, and then they remember, wait, we're not. Self is here. What's that like for your parts? What's that like for you? As Anne says, like, self isn't so accessible right now sometimes, and we all know that. This is what Eli's pointing to too. It's like parts forget. And then there's a sense of remembering or touching into self, that it's there. And for your parts, are like, is it like surprise? Oh, wow, we're jumping out. And it's like, whoa, we're being met and held, and self is here. What's that like for all of us, the back and forth, this back and forth that Eli's pointing to with this beautiful metaphor? What's it like for your parts, Eli, as they remember, wow, we're in a bouncy house, self is here.
They keep they there's a huge sense of relief. It's like they're like exactly how you put it is like they're panicked and then they remember. And so then it's like there's a moment of, oh no, this one's here again, like this one that's like we gotta get somewhere, like we have to fix because we're in danger, we have to do something. And then it's like, oh, that one too, like that so then it starts to run, and then it's like, oh, that one too. And then it's like, and it's just completely relieved. It's like, oh, you can come in too. And then something else will come up, and then it's like a moment of whoa, and then it's like, oh, you can come too. And then they keep kind of getting relieved as they go through that little like shift.
And the shift is remembering that self is here and it includes them.
It's I mean, it's essentially unblending, but it really is like self meeting parts.
And so the part remembers self is here. Maybe as we get more subtle, how much of it is the remembering self is here for the parts? And how much of it is the experience of being met by the bouncy house, by being met by self?
It's mostly the latter.
Mhm.
It feels like it's being absorbed or sunk into, or like where it's like the door was closed and it's open, and it's reopened, it's brought in.
So the experience is really in your system. It's really key for the parts for the you to have this experience of being
Mm-hmm.
welcomed, held by self, to have the experience of it where it pervades and we know it through experience like
Yeah,
that.
it's so right. So like unblending is like is I guess is even like probably too soft of a term. It's like, okay, there is like there is an unblending, there is a self, but it's really the part being met by self that it's like fully, it's going past that. And so that, yeah, that's kind of like it's kind of like the hot tub.
And so this raises, for me, it raises the question of what is it for each of us that gives us that experience that Eli's speaking of being met by self, of having it be an experience, a visceral experience where we know it. So it's not just like, that was kind of my question for Eli. Is it just the remembering that self is here? No, it's really the experiencing of self is here, of the bouncy house, of landing and being held. Wow, it is safe. I am being held. I am being connected with. I am being heard. I'm being understood. I'm being loved. And this is
Mhm.
part of our game, right? This is where I love the qualities of self, because sometimes I don't know how Angela's speaking of it these days, because sometimes the Zen, sometimes it's we just go more to the absolute of the beingness, of the equanimity, of the stillness. But here we take a little concession and get the flavor of it and find these qualities of it. And the reasons we do that is because our parts are longing for this. They're longing for home. They're longing for this absolute that Jean was helping us with desire for it. Well, it's really love and belonging. It's longing for. And so we're helping, letting our system find that. And so my question for all of us is, what's most accessible for us, for our parts, for us to feel self? Is it peace? Is it calmness? Is it a sense of falling, kind of taking the leap, and there it is, we're being met, we're being held, the bouncy house? How does it work in your system? It's very pragmatic. It's a very pragmatic question about how we find the sense of self is here. What else you got for us, Eli?
You hit a lot of good points. It's very spot on with how, like, what I was describing. Um, it's sort of, you've used this term a lot, like the zooming out. It's sort of that, as soon as it's zoomed out and it's seen as quickly, like, oh, this is my story and this is what I want, and that's also here. It like, it happens kind of in one swoop sometimes.
I'm not sure. I've got some questions for you. I'm not sure I followed that. So when we zoom out, and then there's more spaciousness, and then there's more awareness of the parts. And does the zooming out helps with the recognition that, well, maybe that there is self here, or that the help us help us all follow that one, Eli.
Yeah, the zooming out, is the zooming out is defining the self. Then the self is seeing the part and touching into its little story and what it's longing for, and then coming back and meeting it. So it's happening fairly quickly, but there's like a few steps.
Nice. So what about this for all of us, especially when we have experience like Anne's describing? Well, my parts are just here and I'm hearing them and they're loud. This happens for all of us. And I know this very well in my own system. It's like I'm just blended with the parts. There's a lot of noise going on, a lot of words, a lot of thoughts going on here. And then Eli's describing in his system the zooming out. There's a zooming out that happens that gives it space. And then it goes from there. That's the first step in his system, the zooming out. Is it like that for you, or is it different? For some people, they go the opposite direction. When a part's like that, they actually zoom in, they get closer to it, and that helps them find self. It's like, what happened in your system? Or for others, there's just recognizing the part, recognizing that it's not alone. It recognizes there's another part here, or maybe we are part of an internal family system, and that provides space. Like it can be different for each of us. What else you got, Eli?
That's all. Thank you.
How was that? How was that for Anne, Jessica, and Jean? How was that too? How was that for our parts as we went into, as Eli facilitated us in the way it works in sharing his system? Did that translate? It's like, yeah, I really like the bouncy house thing and the remembering and forgetting that really worked for my system. Or no, I don't have a bouncy house. That mine's very different. Like, notice how that worked. And then before we go to Anne, is there anything bubbling any comments, anything bubbling for us with Jessica and Jean on what Eli just said before we go to Anne's system? And then
You're okay to
lastly,
unmute. I
oh,
was muted.
oh, sorry.
I was just gonna comment. I liked that bouncy house. That was fun. I like sometimes the thoughts or feelings. Yeah, there is that frantic, like being on fire, like when you buy into it or identify with it. But the soft landing sounds lovely. For me, it's so subtle. I'll be identifying with parts. I realize I am, and then just make a gentle shift, I shift from it. Typically what I do is shift from it and shift to self. Almost like they're next to each other, like, oh, here's the parts, here's self. I shift to self. When they're intense, I just bring them right into self, and I pull them in, and it's like, get in here, get in this, snuggle best, whatever. You belong. And I just,
Oh,
when they're intense, I just bring them in. Sometimes I
how
have
about
to lay down.
how about that? Isn't that sweet? Come, they just bring them in. We're snuggling. It's like you get the puppy and bring it into the love, and it's just like we're snuggle fast into self. Oh, nice. Mm. Just how are we all doing? We're kind of 40 minutes in together. How are your parts doing? Is there an understanding part? It might be kind of understanding. Is there a comparison part? Like, oh, I want that bouncy house like Eli had. That's so great. Or I want what Jean said, like bringing them all in and the snuggling. And it's just a part, right, that would compare. And we just notice that. Or a sense of a should, like something should be different here. I'd be better off if I was in a bouncy house. And my parts realized they were in a bouncy house. And it's just sweet. It's if we can hear that, any part that has a should or like that, they're just trying to help us. Like, oh, I want that. That would be nicer. It would be just if we can be aware of those voices in us. And can those be okay? Is it okay that they're there? Any kind of should, a comparison, a spiritual achiever. Can we find that they're arising in, that they can be welcomed as well? Or perhaps they can just take a jump. It's like, I don't like, they can take a jump and discover, whoa, there's a bouncy house here. And they can be welcomed. Uh, well, I'm excited because we're about to dive into Anne's world. And I think it's just going to be, I'm fascinated with what's going to come up. And for all of us to see if we can truly travel fully with her and know everything that she shares in our own system. Hey, Anne, how you doing?
Well, I have a lot of different thoughts about what's going on here. One of them is that I'm aware that I don't want to spiritual bypass, and I don't know that I'm in the same place as all of you, because I have a lot of noise in my head. I realize that when I meditate, my mind is really noisy, and where I find peace, if I find it, is after I do the work of Byron Katie, and there are 4 questions and turnarounds in Byron Katie work. And the first one is it true? You're asking a statement that you wrote down, like, he doesn't like me. Is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? What happens? How do you react when you believe that thought? And that's, for me, where a lot of my parts get activated and speak up. And then in the question number 4, it's, who would you be without that thought? So if you couldn't think he doesn't like me, who would you be? And
Okay. Wait,
that,
let me pause for just a minute here, Anne, with this, because I don't want any of us to lose this. In Eli's system, the way he would connect with self in the midst of the parts are loud, they're here. In Eli's system, he described, he kind of zooms out. And what I'm hearing for you, Anne, to get connecting with self is that the 4 questions from Byron Katie are really helpful to get to tune in to self. And just for all of us, can we relate as we hear her to do these questions to how it kind of reveals the beingness, the self that's kind of unblended with parts? If we can track that, because it's very beautiful what she's sharing here. Back, please say more, Anne. Back to you.
well, and then the turnarounds for he doesn't like me would be, I don't like him, he does like me, and I don't like myself. And then you have to find 3 examples for each of those turnarounds. And that also stretches your mind and gives you perspective that you didn't have before. So that for me is very helpful in in unblending and um, finding self. You know, like I'm 67. I've spent most of my life, and then I've been doing IFS for only about a year, maybe more. But I've only been coming here for a few months. So most of my life, I've been in my parts, activated by my parts,
Yes.
acting out of my
So,
parts.
and let me say something real quick in this, because I want to, can you feel the freedom in this for all of us? That it's like that we can, whatever works in our system to find self, to find spaciousness, to find this space. Like Anne has this very particular way that the work of Byron Katie helps her find it. For others, it's, hey, all I got to do is walk out in nature and there it is. Or I got to be with my puppy and there it is. It's like the freedom that there's not this prescribed way. No, you don't have to go meditate for an hour. Like, oh, well, that's the way to do it. Or you got to do IFS. It's like you can, whatever works in your system, that's what we're interested in. What helps you know, what Katie will call your true nature, this being, this that's here when we're not blended with a part, when we're not believing a thought. So how's it go? So how you doing now, Anne? How is it now?
You mean after I just said all that?
How about right now? What's here? How are you?
Well, I'm glad to be here. When I saw Sunday and Monday, I thought I can't do it Sunday, but I could come Monday, and um, I guess I feel like this is a safe space and a welcoming space, and I feel like there are people here um, who I feel connection to. Um,
So how about that? That's such a sweet thing that you just shared. Just a sense of her parts, and for Anne, that there's a sense of there's safety here amongst the four of us, that her parts, any kind of vulnerability, feels a sense of safety, sense of welcoming, a connectedness that I'm guessing allows more openness there, allows more, oh, maybe a little bit of the bouncy house, that maybe we're part of a bouncy house for Anne's system. And it's just sweet to hear that's what we get to be part of for you. And I just love that. And what would be most helpful for you, Anne, that you've got this space with us right now? You've got this connectedness, this welcome, this safety with us. What would be useful for you right now?
mm, to continue to listen to people and and feel my gratitude
Mm.
for for you, Sid, and for everybody here, and um, yeah, for Jean and what you shared. Uh,
And what's it like, the sense that we're really interested in what's going on inside of you? As you had mentioned some parts that, had this procedure and had some parts that came up that are uncomfortable with this or uncertain about it, that there's a sense of, and there's no need to go there. I'm wondering what it's like to know that we are curious and we are interested, and there is a sense of those aspects of you are welcomed here.
well, it's a
And
little. It feels a little like it's too much. I
yeah.
mean, um, the parts of me that are questioning why I did this, or saying if I had known how uncomfortable this would be, I would have done it. And like, what do you think? Talk about desire. Like I do this mostly because I didn't like looking at myself in the mirror, and um, and so I did it for myself. Um, and and but there's also a social aspect of having had it done, um, that I've been by myself in recovering at home since the surgery, so I haven't really encountered that.
Yeah.
But
And then here you are being kind of showing and talking about what happened and with your friends here. And there's that, and I'm sure parts that come up with that.
yeah,
And let me just ask everybody, like this being with Anne now, as this being the space of welcoming, safety, and connectedness, as she speaks about what's here, and just to notice the self that meets her, the welcoming and the space that meets her. And then I'm also going to invite you to notice if there are any parts that come up that might want to problem solve and help, any parts. And there's a reason this is why I can find what we're doing here more valuable than one-on-one, is it can be easier to truly welcome everything that arises in someone else than to truly welcome what arises in us. And as we have this opportunity to do that with Anne, if we can really celebrate this uncertainty that comes, oh, was this a good move? I'm not sure. I don't know, but I really wanted it. I didn't like looking in my face sometimes. And I thought like this would be really great. I could facelift. And it's like as we hear all of that, notice that there's just a celebration of the life that's moving in her. Because as we go deeper in this, if we can truly welcome and celebrate everything that we see in our friend Anne, it's like we're learning how to do the same thing in our own systems. There's no difference. The parts he's describing, we can find all of these, right? I look in the mirror, it's like, what happened to my neck? Oh my God. And it's like, we all know this. We all know it. And it's like, as we can welcome it and celebrate it and it becomes more familiar with having that in our own system, welcoming everything that arises. And that's a pretty beautiful place to be and to live this life. Back to you, Anne.
I don't know what else to say. I am, yeah, I don't know. Give me a lead. I don't know what to say.
No. Is there any scariness and like being seen? And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, first thing I said to you was, hey, interesting hat you're wearing
yeah,
today.
yeah.
Um,
Well, there's fear of judgment. There's fear that people are going to be too curious and ask me what happened to me. And, I don't want to tell them. And uh, there's fear. Well, I said it, fear of judgment. Yeah. So all of those
yeah,
things.
yeah. So as we hear that, like I just fall in love with Anne and just notice what happens in your system when you hear that. And it's just and then notice if there are any parts that come up and just what that's like in your system. Wow. Thanks for taking us here, Anne. I mean, this is
See,
beautiful
I
exploration.
have the feeling that a lot of people who come to your sessions are already in this place of delicious selfhood. And truthfully, that's what I hear from you. And that's not where I'm at. And so when I listen, and Sid, I feel like that about you sometimes. And so I wonder if I'm in the right place, but I keep coming back because I I like the way it feels, and
Mm.
um, and I like all of you. So
Oh, for me, this might be the very deepest part of our hour and a half together right now, where Anne is taking us. And I love how you started off, Anne. Your first line was, I don't want to, or one of your first lines, I don't want to bypass. I don't want to bypass. And that's just, that's where I think it's one of the real gifts of the IFS, especially in marrying with work like Angelo's, where with Angelo, we really can get a sense of the self, because we're really focusing on self. But then what I love about IFS is Dick Schwartz will say it's like a bodhisattva path internally to find what's left and welcome everything home and leave nothing behind. Everything gets to be welcomed home. And Anne, you're just helping us find it, to know it within our own system. This sense of like this, like what you said, for you, when you said, I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. And for some of us, especially Byron Katie, I did the school of the work with her, and that's part of the school for the work. It's like this sense of looking in the mirror. And I'm guessing even now, for even our friends Jean and Eli, who are just they just spent these days with Angelo, and they just loving self. When they're looking in the mirror, when they're looking at their Zoom screen, and they look closely, or they get really close and look at their face, they're gonna be things that like, wow, this isn't just beautiful and perfect, just the way it is, right? We have other things that come up, and that's the diamonds, that's the good stuff. And that's what we're getting to be with through what you've shared with us today. And I don't want to put you on the spot for your parts, and we'll go to Jessica in just a few moments, but I'm wanting to just respect and have this be gentle for all of us. Anything else you'd like to share, Anne, before we move to Jessica?
Well, there probably is, but I can't think of it. I guess, I appreciate that my parts don't have to be all calm and integrated into myself or unblended or whatever. And I think I'm not making any sense. So pass it to Jessica.
Well, you are so welcomed. You're so welcome here. I've noticed it's just about the top of the hour, and I wanted to open it up first to final words from Eli, because he'll be leaving us in a minute. And but you just lastly, Anne, just in what you find is the safety, the welcoming, and the connectedness here. Just the sense that even what you just said, all the parts that are here, everything is welcomed. Everything is welcomed. You're not alone. Eli, what you got? Give us something inspirational as you transition from us today.
Thank you all. Thank you for sharing, and thanks for being here. And there's a lot of time spent in the building on fire, and then sometimes there's a bouncy house. Many times there's not. I just thought I would share the visual that was as I was going through it. But yeah, thank you all. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
I got to say, this bouncy house is like one of my favorite new images, and I am so going to be talking that one. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Sid. Take care, everyone.
See you later. So here we are, and now we're 4. And just as we, breath, shake it off, here we are. Nothing to do. We're just playtime together, enjoying each other, and kind of understanding parts that are making sense of this all. It's like, oh, there it is. Just before we go to Jessica, how are you? How are you? Notice what's here, what parts are in the foreground. Jessica's like, sitting part like, oh, what am I gonna say? Here it goes. It's gonna ask me questions. Oh gosh, I don't really want to do this. It's so early. Or, maybe it's a healer part. Like, what parts are here? And then what's everything arising in? Is it an awareness? Is it that place Jean described, where he's just kind of hugging these parts and loving them? of self. What is the self? What is this space? Bouncy house, love, flow, hot tub, or just presence, or just stillness or emptiness that arising in. And then, are you curious as I am as we look at Jessica Square? And she's like, oh, look. And we're like, what? What's what's there? What are her parts? What are they expressed? Because we've heard Anne's, we've heard Jane's. What's happening in Jessica's system? What are the parts that are there? And is something going to be like, whoa, that's really cool. I didn't know that part within me, but now I know it. I heard it from Jessica. And then what's it all rising in? What's self for Jessica? Maybe you can even feel it right now as you notice her. You can even feel into the parts and self. Sometimes we can all do it somatically. What do we feel? In a minute, she's going to tell us. You ready? Ready for the big reveal? All right, Jessica, what's happening? What's there?
Oh my goodness. I definitely have don't see me parts up this morning. I keep waking up weepy. And I heard a definition of trauma the other day that I had never heard before, and it was basically when we have to exile part of ourselves in order to belong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much insight. Like when you
will you say that again? Will you say that again for us? That definition of trauma.
Yeah, it's not exactly what they said. It's sort of my reinterpretation, but in kind of more IFS-y terms. But what of ourselves we have to exile in order to belong?
Thank you.
And every time, and you don't say it very often, but every once in a while you will say something about us not being alone. And I have parts that only want to be alone because that's the only time I truly feel safe. And so every time you say that, I have a part that's like, don't say that. I have to be alone sometimes. And just noticing that safety that my parts find in disconnection and being alone is where I have exiled parts of me that maybe I am welcoming home, but I don't believe it will be welcomed home in community.
Let me ask a question first, Jessica, with this one that you shared, because there's a gem there for me that you say that you have some parts that only truly feel safe when they are alone. Let's just see if we can all find parts of us, aspects of us that resonate with that. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's the why. That's where I find safety. For parts, not for all of us, there are parts of us. Others find it in the bouncy house, right? And it's like and then for those parts, do we have another part that says, oh, it's better if it wasn't that way? Is there a spiritual achiever or a part that might be critical of that and saying, I shouldn't need to be just alone to feel truly safe? And just if we can notice if we have a part like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, for our parts that only find their true safety when they're alone, notice how how beingness sees those aspects of us, see those parts. Does it see any problem, or does it just like celebrate? Oh, how wonderful. these parts find safety by being alone. They're just welcomed and accepted just the way they are. Nothing needs to change. Back to you, Jessica.
Okay, give me a second. So I keep finding basically two different paths, and I have struggled with this for all of my time with IFS, which is the internal path and the community path. And so there's what is safe to welcome home within me, but there's also what is safe to welcome home and allow to be here in community. And so this morning I was feeling weepy, and I did this on another call yesterday. I showed up and so I'm a little further along today because I worked on some of it yesterday, which was the part that said this is not the place for it, get it together.
But how about this, Jessica? How about just what you said, that there's an internal path and a communal path, and that like when we're together in community, there's some parts that it's not appropriate or okay or safe to welcome home, to be seen in the communal venue. Let's just see if we can all appreciate that. Like we're even right now as we're together, and Anne's like, yes, thank you, Jessica, exactly. That as we're together, even in a place, even in an environment like this, which is all about welcoming parts, right? Even here, that there's some aspects of it, some parts that, no, I don't want, I'm not going to share that. And I want to suggest, even to celebrate, that we have the protectors, right? That say, you don't really want to go there. We're not going to do that. The protectors that do that. Can we appreciate those that are like, I want this to be gentle. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want all those things to come up. So it's like the protectors that do that for us. Can that be welcomed? Is there a problem here? Is there a problem when that happens? That's just like, okay, in the communal, I'm not going to have to talk about what happened in the bathroom an hour ago. Is that okay? And so what comes up for you, Jessica, as you talk about this internal and communal contrast?
Yeah, it's been a big part of my journey, is trying to sort those two things out. Because there is, what happens then is when I'm in community and a part comes up, it might get sent away again
Right?
by me.
Yeah.
And so what I was feeling a little bit earlier was this sense of I just lost the word, but like this question, but not really a question, just sitting with the thought of, can the part stay as it is? Even in me, can I allow the part to stay as it is without asking it to change?
Mhm.
But when other people can see that's what's happening.
Yeah. So what about this? What about the sense of, parts are all being welcomed. As we know, when there's a sense of the abiding more and more self, it just welcomes what's here. There's just an acceptance and okay with what's here. And so we have a part that comes up and it's welcome. But then we also have a protector that's like, okay, we don't need to show this part in public. It's going to be more drama inside than we really want to deal with. And so we're just not going to do that. Like, can there be an okayness with that in a celebration of this is how my system works?
Yes. And it's been an imbalance where that part gets to speak and the other part doesn't.
Yeah, and
It
especially, and you gave us a line at the beginning about trauma that parts have to be exiled in order to belong, right? And I'm guessing that those parts that are keep getting pushed aside when there's something public happening and communal, there's just like, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah. And it's part of what makes life worth living. Like if I'm in community and every time I'm in community, I have to hide half of who I am.
Yeah.
Those
But
parts
how
are
about,
going to be upset all the time in community.
yeah, right. And this is happens. You live with family and it doesn't stop. Your community, much of our lives, we're within community.
Yeah.
And we don't have the luxury of what Anne has, where she could just kind of really separate through this time that she's describing. But it's like, but so can we appreciate what we're hearing in Jessica? We hear like there's like a speaking up for, there's like a speaking for these parts that have been pushed away. Hear that? Like these parts that have been, like she says, like there's a sense of like these parts, these aspects of me have to be exiled in order to belong. And she's saying, something, I don't like this. I don't like this. And if I'm doing the communal path, it's like a lot of these aspects of me, these parts, they don't get to be there. They don't get to be fully there. And she's saying something doesn't feel so good with this. It's like speaking for her parts. Like, do you have any, like, as we hear Jessica say this, do you have parts inside that have kind of been exiled, which is just an IFS word for kind of buried, pushed aside, or not appropriate, pushed, and that are like, I want Jessica to speak for me too in your systems, like that like these aspects of us that have been buried that we're like, that's not appropriate. That is like, no, I want to be included too. I want Jessica to speak for me. I want to be included in this. Enough is enough. I love this. Who saw that new IFS movie Inside Out 2? Anybody who saw that so far? Anybody? No? It's really the theme of the movie is that they keep pushing these parts. They send them to they push this button and they go to the back of the brain. All these parts of us, these aspects that we're like, okay, no, 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 no. And at the end, there's an avalanche. It becomes an avalanche where all those aspects have to come back into this main character, Riley. And that's where it goes. And this is where we're kind of hearing that in Jessica's system of the sense of the excluding. It's like you do this too much and it becomes like that movie. It's like you just can't, everything comes in. But we're trying to, what does this look like in gentleness? In gentleness of like appreciating the protectors, and not just being super reckless and like bring it all. Hey, I'm going to speak for those parts. I'm going to let them come in and do their thing. Maybe that's what has to happen, but like we're exploring the gentleness of including everything in these parts that have been pushed aside. What you got, Jessica? How you doing?
Yeah. I was noticing as you were speaking, there's also this sense now of how much of it is true now and how much of it is parts stuck in the past when it wasn't okay. And that is, different based on where I am and who I'm with and all of that.
Oh.
but just noticing that is worth questioning.
So can that be fascinating? It's like for the parts perspective, because we have parts that are really young, like it is not, that have ideas of safety that are very different than Jessica today.
Yeah. And so as I can be with those parts internally, then I can take more risk externally, but with wisdom and clarity in what's hopefully a better space for those parts to be.
Let me just check in with all of us as Jessica is sharing her internal world with us. How is it being met in your system? Is there a sense of like awe, curiosity, fascination, interest, connectedness? Like what's there? Or is there, and then we also have parts that are like maybe problem solving. And we just notice those. I'm not saying one's better than the other. We're just noticing what's coming up, just to be aware of it. Aware of how we're meeting, what's it evoking in you? Because that's what we're really interested in, is your journey today. What's happening inside of you as Jessica is helping facilitate these last 20 minutes through her sharing her system. What's happening inside of you? And is everything Jessica's sharing, is it welcomed, or does it bring up fear in you? The sense of, well, some of those parts that have been buried, there's a reason they're buried, and there's a reason. And as she speaks of letting them come up, does it bring up fear, or does it relate to your system? Like some of these parts that we're just kind of holding away, it's kind of scary. Does it bring up protectors in your system? Because ultimately where we're going, right, as we practice, it just happens organically. There's nothing you have to do. But as we become more aware of what's happening in our system, and there's more a sense of awareness of parts and self just gets to this welcoming, this openness, this care, that Jean's describing, that space. It just organically starts opening more in our system, because there's nothing we have to do. It's just what we're doing it right now. Back to you, Jessica.
I don't know if I have anything more.
Awesome. So this is perfect, because we got like 10 more minutes and we can just see what's coming up for everybody. And Anne's got something too. Any final words with what you were sharing, Jessica? I mean, it was so much and so rich. That's good.
Good. Thanks for letting me be here. Thanks for not kicking me out yet, Sid.
That's the way I feel every time I open my mouth here. I can really identify with you, Jessica. And I think it's interesting that you broke down your experience here in EIFS as being on an internal path, and then recognizing also a community path. And I think I didn't grow up with much of a sense of community. Community is something that I've only really learned probably in the last 10 years, learned about in the last 10 years. And then it's difficult for me to feel a part of community. I don't know. I just wanted to say that. I don't know if I can say more on that. But you talked about the parts of you that want to be alone, that only feel safe when they're alone. And I really resonate with that. I mean, the first couple of days after my surgery, I had nurses here to help me. I was supposed to have a nurse or somebody here 24 hours after the surgery. And then she had to bring me to the doctor and stuff. And I spend so much time alone. I said to one of them at one point, I spend so much time by myself, I don't know how to act when somebody is here with me. And all she said was, you only have to be yourself, or just be yourself, or something. And I even wrote about this in my EIFS journal, that felt like something something really big that she had said, that she had no idea how difficult it was for me to understand that. So but there's also a part of me, a really big part of me, and this gets activated on holidays and sometimes on weekends, and all that stuff, that says I shouldn't be so alone. There's something, furthermore, there's something wrong with me that I'm so alone. And yeah, I just wanted to say that was how I was empathizing with you at that moment. And I'm really glad to be here, and I do feel a sense of community, mostly because of what people shared honestly of themselves. That's what I feel in community with, honesty. It doesn't matter who's really there, but if people are being honest, I can feel like I can take a breath. Like there's something good happening, even if it's not as deep and complete as sometimes when you're in self. But
Mm.
um,
I'd like to say something about that for a
hold
minute.
on, just because I might not remember this. Along with the feeling of good community, feeling good in community right now, and feeling excited about something new in my life, I want to honor a feeling of lingering self-doubt, or lack of self-confidence, or lack of self-worth, whatever you want to call it, because that's what I don't want to bypass. I don't want to. I don't want to hoodwink myself into believing that everything is cool with me, and I'm good in my skin, and blah blah blah, because that's there and that's a part of me. So anyway, I just wanted to.
Yeah.
That was what came up when you were speaking. Thank you so much, Jessica. Sorry, Sid.
Isn't it nice not to be alone in this? Just love what you shared. Sometimes it's scary being vulnerable. Jessica just shared a lot, and you just really met her and all of that. That was so sweet. And also I appreciating this lingering self-doubt, not wanting to bypass it. It's like it's here, here, be with that. And then something that I love is that Banan speaks of that maybe it's not as deep, or I forget how you just said it, like it's the depth of this, or the depth of just being in self. And the nice thing is I find that that's something that falls away in this journey, that we play, I call it the first view, where we discern parts in self, and that becomes the art. And it's really helpful to help us get to abide more as self and sink in and know self better by doing the either or. But then it's just later on in this, and then we have this idea, what's the spiritual journey? What's this whole spiritual journey healing? It's like to know self, to abide more as self, and to do that. But then it all seems to come together, where it comes back to like, oh, when I'm healed, where am I going to be but here? Like, really, when I'm healed, where am I going to be but here and now? And that's, and it's just, and then that's when it just becomes a celebration of this life and how it's moving in us. And that what Anne's describing, that's here for her, and if we had Angelo here who just is, for me, he represents for a lot of people, for some people, just being self, and this is the depth of self. But I'm going to suggest that Angela's sharing wouldn't be any more beautiful than Anne's. That's a really radical thing to say, but it's like this life that is here. It's all moving through us, and Angelo's and Anne's, and it's like as we open more to that, it it lets us welcome our the beauty of our humanity just the way it is. The beauty of this self-doubt that's there. Like, is it really a problem that self-doubt is here? Is it really a problem that, well, the communal's different than the private? Or is it just how it's expressing how this life is moving in us? And so there's an objective of this effortless EIFS meetings. It's the celebration of everything that's here. And we kind of play with the progressive path in this way, and the idea of getting more clarity and getting more self and healing parts. But at the same time, we celebrate, we go deep into this humanity and see how deep we can go, and appreciating and seeing the innocence and beauty of it. And here's what's really cool. If we were hearing Anne, we were just hearing, I'm guessing you were hearing innocence and what she was saying and the parts. It's not a big step from seeing the innocence to seeing the radiant presence of self in these parts. It's just, that's why I play with these words. Can we see the innocence in what she's saying? Because if we can do that, where it goes is we see the innocence in her parts, and we see the innocence in our parts, even the parts that, hey, I'm not okay with these exiles being hidden anymore, the innocence with that, and the exiles that want to be included. If we see the innocence of it, it's a really nice shortcut, because then it's not a very big move to seeing the radiant presence, seeing the self in those parts. Right. We are just about at time, and we haven't heard from Jean in a while. Any final bubbling thoughts from you, Jean?
No, that I appreciated so much everyone's vulnerability. I could really, really feel that, feel the feelings that were coming through. And I did notice for myself, I did go into the problem solving mode, and I wanted to, fix everything and fix everyone. So I have that tendency always. And it's really hard
Can we not all say me too to that one? Can we not all say me too to what you just said? Thank you.
Yeah.
Please continue, Jean.
Yeah, no, it's just it's good to be in a space where you're not called to give advice. You're not even it's not even welcome. It's not a place for it, I guess I'll say. That is not what we're doing here. And so it's very, very good practice and growth for me to just not. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm noticing in myself. I also did want to say to Anne, I've had the last couple months, I'd say I've been in darkness. And in this meeting right now, with you guys, the excited anticipation, I'm in a good, what I would, qualify as being a good place. I feel good right now. I don't live there though. That's not where I live. I'm here because I want to live there more often. So
me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, everybody. Again, like the beauty of what we've just done for the hour and a half, and how that was all of us. In a way, it was much more you all leading than me, as far as going into the depth of what's happening in you, and how this just came together in that way. And thank you for the magic of today. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.